Welcome back to Flying Upstream, where we celebrate the powerful ways people choose to live, heal, and create outside the mold. I'm Kristen, and today we're welcoming an extraordinary guest whose life and art have been shaped not by easy paths, but by resilience, self discovery, and transformation through creative expression. Susan Cohen is a trained musician and a self taught visual artist, a lifelong empath who sees auras and experiences the world through vibrant color. Susan discovered at a young age that creativity was more than a hobby, it was a lifeline. Through emotional and physical trauma, eating disorders, and a performance career that demanded she meet impossible standards, Susan found her escape and her truth through nature, music, art, and eventually deep healing. Her journey is raw, real, and beautifully human. And today she's sharing how expressive art and connection to nature can be tools for not just coping with trauma, but reclaiming joy. Welcome to the podcast, Susan.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing. All right. So, Susan, thank you so much for being here. You have described creativity as your oasis. Can you take us back to when you first realized that art and music could be healing?
I can go back as far as being 3, 4 years old, believe it or not. My household there was a lot of anger and yelling and, fraught with financial stress. So I remember going out in my yard, which at the time was my oasis, and finding leaves off the ground and making jewelry and getting lost in you know, the motion of tying jewelry together, leaves together, making a crown or making a necklace. And from there, my imagination would just wander and I'd create stories in my mind. It really became an escape for me, to be honest.
That's incredible that you can remember even that far back.
Yeah.
I love that. I appreciate it because it just speaks to who we are deep down, and that there are some things that we just are who we are, and we can find
Right.
that healing in nature. And I think nature is healing for everybody, and some people have an opportunity at a young age to find nature, music, and art as well.
Yes,
Love that.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
you're Go ahead.
No, no, no. I wasn't going to say anything. Sorry.
So you're both a trained musician and a self-taught visual artist. So how do
That's
these
right.
Yeah, I'm wondering how these two forms of expression differ and how they help you process emotion, or how are they connected?
It's a great question. Well, I started studying piano first. My parents sent me for lessons, but I will say that my father was a self-taught musician, and to this day, probably the finest musicians I've ever heard of. He played piano. He actually started on accordion and would play on the radio in those days. And he taught himself how to play the piano. He would listen to a piece of music and be able to orchestrate it just on the piano. He was that brilliant.
Wow.
And so because he couldn't read music, he sent his daughter. I mean, I remember at the age of 5, even him playing the piano and me putting my hands over his hands and feeling the vibration and the expression of the music. So he sent me for formal instructions at an early age. And from there, I learned I could sing. And I worked with him for many years before he passed away, just learning how to scat sing, which is an art form in jazz. And then I went off to college and I studied classical music, and I had to make a choice between classical or jazz. And I ended up going the jazz route. So I was performing professionally for many years, but that was a difficult career. There was a lot of adversity, a lot of rejection, cruel standards to go by. I've never been skinny, which is probably why I ended up being anorexic for a while. I struggled with a lot of eating disorders, and I was physically and emotionally abused and a lot of stuff. And it found that the music and the art is really what my tools that I used for coping. To this day, I'm great at getting lost in my own head and using my imagination to escape.
It's actually a pretty healthy way to escape
Yes,
considering other options. Um,
exactly.
I love that, and I so appreciate that you have this strong foundation in not only being a nature lover, but of music and understanding it, singing, performing. And I want to pivot a little bit. So knowing that as
Yeah.
your background, you have kind of come into a new tool in your life, which
Yes,
is
I have.
fire. Yes, fire scrying. And I want to get into that, how you use it. First of all, tell us what it is, how you use it to
Yes,
center yourself, and how it came to you.
sure. Again, when I was a child, I did some camping, and I'm by no means saying I'm a camper. It's not my realm of comfort, but when we would sit around the campfire and sing songs, that kind of thing, I'd find myself mesmerized by the flame. And I didn't realize at the time, but I was doing fire scrying. And um, long story short, there was a psychic brother and sister who came to town. They were from Woodstock, and they channeled their mother, who was a renowned psychic, and pointed me out in the audience and said she needs to keep going with her fire scrying. She's an artist and can read people through her painting. So that was 30 years ago. And what I do now is I focus on my fire scrying simply by meditating over a flame, and images come to my mind, and I put them down with paints, colors, and images come through, shapes come through, color, symbolism. And with that, I'm able to type out a document so I can give my client both a painting and a life path message for them, essentially.
That this is such a unique talent and skill to have. Was it a surprise for you? Right? So you're sitting in the audience just enjoying the show, and all of a sudden they're like, you.
Actually, and I'm, believe it or not, being a performer, I'm shy. And so when they singled me out, I was a little taken aback. But then I went home that very day and did what they told me. They even given me questions to ask people to get started. And it came to me like I was doing it for all my life. It was very comfortable and rewarding and inspiring in so many ways.
That's incredible. So, how did you get started in an official capacity? I say because you had some of the building blocks, right? You said you liked looking in the campfire when you were younger, and so it was there. But how was the transition to making it more official and doing this as a service for people?
Sure. I've always had a fascination with spirituality. I'm not a religious person, but I do love the thought that there's a higher power, a higher source out there. And I've always studied what potentially is out there. And I'm familiar with all of the laws of attraction and manifesting. And I've been studying it for many years. And art was another tool. I say self-taught because when my career in singing didn't pan out, I did end up transferring that expression to art, and I was getting known as a painter. But I traveled in a lot of circles where I was taking classes on how to be a psychic, classes on um, you know trying to figure out why I was seeing colors everywhere. And, it just started word of mouth. I have a presence online now. I have a website finally. And it's really been mostly word of mouth, to tell you the truth.
So you mentioned you see colors, auras, right? And you
Right.
also call yourself an empath. How has this sensitivity shaped both your own trauma and your healing?
Well, it's interesting. In between being an artist and a musician, I taught in a urban school district for 25 years, and it was a very difficult population. And it was difficult for me from the standpoint that I could feel their pain, so much pain and anguish, which leads to violence, quite frankly, in the classroom. It was going on so frequently that I was having difficulty not being emotional and trying to stand my ground and trying to be an authority figure, because frankly I think kids that have no direction need someone who's strong, who can stand their ground and be there for them. So, because I was a music teacher, I didn't want to follow their curriculum. And in fact, one kid once commented, I'll never forget it, I don't want to listen to dead white man music. Okay. So I developed a curriculum where I learned what they liked. We delved into hip hop, rap, a lot of different things. It was a trade off. But it was that the violence that inspired me to write this book. It's backwards, I see, but it's called Healing Through Nature and Animals: A Journey of Illumination. I did all the illustrations, but it's based on a character like many of the kids that I worked with, and it's also loosely based on some of my traumas. And it's where I share with them tools that they're not at all familiar with, where nature and animals deliver messages. And I just kind of found that my creativity was what helped me cope and really want to help others.
That's so beautiful. Just that you, more than just you saw a problem and wanted to provide some solution to it, but that you were so inspired by your children, by these kids that you were teaching, and not in the way that one might think, which is like, oh, these kids have so many problems, I don't want to be here.
Right,
You're like, no, I'm going to meet them where they're at. If they want to learn about rap and hip hop because that's what they're into, let's do that.
right.
And bringing what helped you into an actual book that could then help and inspire them too is so beautiful.
Thank
Um,
you.
I really love that. So,
No, I was just
uh,
going to say that it's geared for adolescents because it has sexual content in it. So I never tell people to below the age of 12. I don't recommend it. Just as an FYI, it's a little tough.
appreciate that. Um, okay, so for someone who may be listening right now, who has never painted or played music, doesn't have a lot of exposure to nature, and they're feeling broken, how would you encourage them to begin using creativity as a way to process pain?
I would say first learn how to listen to your breathing. Take slow, deep breaths in and then double it with exhaling out, and learn how to slow down your thoughts that way using breath work. And once you're able to do that, you can start really listening and get these downloads. That's what they are for me. They're these creative downloads that tell you maybe you prefer to use crayons. Maybe you want to use paint. Maybe you want to sit down and write a journal. Whatever your thing is, where it feels close to you in terms of being able to express yourself. For some people, it's writing. For some people, it's drawing, it's painting. Some people want to sit down at the piano. They don't know how to read a lick of music. Fine. Sit down at an instrument and just play with it. It's so incredibly therapeutic and healing.
Yes, I appreciate that. It's sort of like just find one thing that speaks to you and do it. Push one piano key. Just try it out. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I do think there is something about the freedom to be creative, whatever creative means to you, that
Exactly.
opens you up on your soul level, right? There's something about that. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, I really believe that we're all souls having a human experience in human bodies. But I think that the soul always lives on. And I think there's so many layers. You get inundated with what society wants or what your family tells you is right or wrong, that sometimes you lose sight of who you really are inside. And the arts really help you to get back to what your soul wants and where you're expected to go from there. And you know it's very
Yeah,
healing.
agreed. The thing about healing too is that it can be a difficult journey because it's rarely linear. So it's two steps forward, one step back, two steps forward, one step back. How do you support yourself when old wounds resurface or when you fall back into self-doubt or unhealthy patterns?
There's a lot of that happens. I mean, the biggest battle for me personally is that inner dialogue telling me, "No, you can't," and I have to be the devil's advocate and say, "Hey, you
Mhm.
can." Um, and I don't always get supported monetarily by what I do, but I share with anyone who wants to listen or see, and it's always rewarding to see that it brings them joy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, in my own experience too, I definitely, as much progress as I've made in my own journey, it's hard, right? You think like, what am I doing? This isn't good enough. The self-doubt comes back real
Yeah.
strong sometimes. And
Yes.
what I try to remember is, if I can help just one person out there, it's worth it. If one person changes the
Exactly.
way they look at themselves or life, like it's so worth it. It's so worth it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
For even one,
Yeah. Giving to
exactly,
others.
not to have to
Yep.
go through the same battles that we've gone through. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Spare
Yes,
them.
absolutely. And, what are your thoughts on community? So as you're healing and trying to move through your own journey forward, how have you used community for that?
I think community is really important, but I also think it's challenging to find the right community. And that's been a challenge for me. I live in an area that's more conservative, and I gravitate towards, the creative, spiritual, like-minded people, and I end up doing that virtually. So if you can't find what you need in your local area, then thank God for Google and all of that. You can research the areas that you're interested in. Sometimes social media offers you that. You can join some groups, and you'll know when this is the community that you're meant to be with because it resonates deeply with you.
Yes, agreed. That's beautiful. There is something to listening to that, your own intuition, as you said. When you find the right people, the right community, you will know it. Absolutely.
Right.
Well, we've had such a lovely conversation, Susan, and we're kind of winding down.
I'm sorry about my dogs in the background if you can hear them.
Oh, good. They're excited. I love it. Um, So, if you could place one paintbrush, one journal, or one musical instrument in the hands of someone who's hurting and whisper just one message in their ear, what would you say?
I love this question. And I would say close your eyes and feel. And as soon as an emotion comes to mind, go with it. Just go with it. Sometimes you may hear a word or just feel a sensation that could be pain or joy, whatever it is. If it's joy, reach out for a color that makes you happy and start right there. If it's pain, play a minor chord. Or if you don't know what minor major chords are, just find a depth in an instrument that's lower and resonates with you where the pain is.
I love that. I love that. Just start where you are. Beautiful. Well, thank
Exactly.
you so much, Susan, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
For our free
Appreciate it.
spirits listening, Susan Cohen is a living reminder that healing doesn't always come in a straight line, but it does come often through color, movement, stillness, and connection. Whether through firelight, a melody, or a moment in nature, Susan has shown us that trauma may shape us, but it doesn't have to define us. Expression is liberation, and creativity is a gift we can all access to begin again. Just beautiful. As always, wherever you are in your story, keep questioning, keep creating, and keep flying upstream.